Welcome to Sentred, the podcast. I'm your host, Janie Morris, and I'm so excited about our next episode because, as you know, every episode we bring you people from around Australia, around the world, that have got a story to tell, that have got inspiration to share, that have got information that motivates and also sort of makes you think about good health, well-being, longevity and fitness. And today my guest, well, we perhaps shouldn't put the cameras on her yet because the first time I actually heard her voice was when I was getting onto a plane, a Virgin Airlines plane actually. And when I got on there and started putting my headphones on and listening to something, I thought, what a beautiful voice that was. And then after that, I was walking through Coles one day and I was listening to something that, you know, how they play the music and, you know, little commercials and things. And I thought, that's the Virgin Airlines girl. And then I turned on MTV and who did I see? It was Zoe Sheridan. And I'm so excited because she's with us today in the studio here, Soul Centred, the podcast. Zoe, welcome. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jenny. That was such a great introduction. My eyes are watering. I feel so blessed. That's a really cool way of describing how you met me. And I'm wondering when you were on the Virgin Plains, because I did the safety announcement first, which was, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Virgin Australia. But then I was lucky enough to get meditations onto their podcast, onto the entertainment, I guess you'd call it. So what did you hear, or both?
Well, now that you've said that, I think I've also heard the meditations. It was definitely the safety announcement that got my attention. So before we get into that, Zoe, for our audience, you know, so many people do know you. You've been in the media for a couple of decades now. Here in Australia, you are you're really a trailblazer. You have been a trailblazer on television with some of your amazing interviews and the hostings that you've done, and certainly in your radio career as well. Can you give our listeners a little bit of background on you before we get right into the guts of the interview?
Yes. Well, interestingly, I got my first break in radio in Adelaide, and that was at Triple M on the day they launched, and I was driving the Black Thunders. So I went to radio school here. Back then it was called the Vaughan Harvey School of Radio.
I remember that.
Yes, and we actually had turntables. That's how old I am. Anyway, we did a tour of SAFM, and I remember thinking, wow, if I get to come to SAFM, if I worked here, that was my dream. That was like the ceiling. And I was very, very fortunate. I went to New York and, well, first of all, in Sydney, and I just didn't have the confidence and I didn't really know where to go about getting into radio. So I started DJing instead in nightclubs and hosting karaoke, which I'd done in Adelaide as well, which was really fun. And I was working in radio. Oh, no, I wasn't. Sorry, that's the next trip. I haven't even got into radio yet. Anyway, so I went to New York, and I remember standing on the top of the Empire State Building and looking down at how tiny everyone was and the hundreds of people. And it was like a little bell went off when you have those epiphany moments. No one is going to walk up to you, Zoe, and say, hi, would you like a job in radio? So I came back to Adelaide and I knocked on the door of Triple M, took my resume in. I knew they were about to launch. And I kept calling and calling. And one day the receptionist said, oh, I'm sorry, he's busy. This was the head of promotions. He's interviewing people. So I said, well, I'll hold, thank you. This guy had been calling all the time. I won't mention his name. And he's a great guy. He's doing very well. Anyway, I said, why aren't you interviewing me? I've been calling you every day. And he said, well, you've got to come in now. And I was on my way to a U2 concert down at Footy Park. And he said, well, I'm getting on a plane, so it's now or never. So I went in, and because I was going to the U2 concert, I was wearing a short black dress, and I'm pretty sure that got me. That sounds really sexist. But I got the job, and I loved radio, absolutely loved it. I mean, I was saying to them, I'll clean toilets, I'll do anything just to get my foot in the door. And then from there I went to SAFM, They were still separate companies then. And then they moved me to Brisbane, which I loved, and then Sydney. And then I was in Sydney for the last over 20 years.
Yeah.
But I've popped back to Adelaide sometimes and worked in radio. And one of the times my relationship broke up and the father of my two children went back to Sydney, and my oldest daughter was then 4, and I was noticing she was really missing her dad. So that was why I tried anything. It's funny how adversity is sometimes such a blessing in disguise, because that's how I got the job working for MTV and VH1. It was just like I'll do anything, to get back to Sydney. And it was a great opportunity, and I got to interview so many amazing bands and people. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah. So your media career has been long and has been great. And you're back in Sydney, and then things start to change for you at that point, didn't they, Zoe? You started to get a different look on life itself, and in particular with kids, because of your 2 young kids. Can you share with us a little bit about the next stage of what you got into over there
Yes,
and why?
I almost fell into meditation. I have a recurring knee injury. I tore my ACL jumping over a tennis court net when I was 24, and
That'll do it.
Yes, it did. They said it was worse than a footballer's injury. Anyway, it was one of those adversary situations, a challenge, where I was due to have a knee reconstruction. When they went in to do it, it was too mangled. They said, you've got to come back in 6 weeks, I think it was. And a friend of mine gave me a book on meditation. And if you've ever read Eat, Pray, Love, it was actually the Guru Maya. It was written by her predecessor, Guru Shaktananda, I think. And I should know that name. Anyway, I read the book, and I would sit outside and visualize myself running, my knee working perfectly. And at the same time, I was on my crutches going to a swimming pool nearby and walking up and down. Anyway, I came back to the hospital 6 weeks later, and they were like, what have you done? And I didn't need to have the knee reconstruction. I did a little bit of meditation, but it just kind of fell away for a long time. And then years later, it was the same knee. I was at a children's birthday party on a trampoline. Someone double jumped me back on crutches, went to the Sydney knee specialist, and after looking at the scans, he was like, you have no cartilage. How are you running? How are you not in pain? And he was like, I don't want to give you I don't want to give you a reconstruction because you might be in pain. Anyway, I went to a natural healer where they had a crystal light bed. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
I have,
They
indeed.
put
yes.
the crystals on your chakras. Now, they suggested that I come to their weekly meditation group where they did a guided meditation. It was in Bondi Junction. So I went along a Tuesday night. I really enjoyed it. I was like a duck to water. And they said, I think they noticed, they said, we think you should come to Brazil with us. And I was like, wow, single mom, don't have the money to go to it. The flights were very expensive to South America. Anyway, they said, if you're meant to come, the money will come. But I also went to put money, it was back when you put money in a parking meter, and there was a coin from Panama stuck in there, and I thought that was a sign. I'm very big on signs.
Yes.
So off I went to Brazil, and that really started a massive, very big learning curve, massive journey for me. I remember thinking, packing bikinis and thinking I was going to be like Rio. I was going on this great party time with a bit of meditation. Not like that at all. I was in a little country town, and it was a real retreat. So within the first 2 days, I was told to go to my room for 24 hours. And it was almost like the 10-day meditation retreats, the silent retreats, Vipassana, where there's no reading, no writing, no drawing. You really are in silence. and you didn't see anyone. They would knock on the door and give you your food. And I absolutely loved it. The time flew by. And I was like, and then the rest of the time we would meditate. Say there are 7 days a week, 4 days a week. We would meditate 4 hours in the morning and 4 hours in the afternoon. So this was very big for me, going from doing a guided meditation once a week. In this time, and you sat up on a wooden bench. In this time, I had many amazing experiences. I went to past lives, whether you believe that or not. And I questioned it as well. I was like, am I just making this up in my imagination? But the most important thing, I think, was that I was told I would teach children to meditate. And I went to my meditation and I said, this is crazy. I don't even know how to meditate. And he said, beautiful Frank Boffer, who I use his channeled music still in my meditations, he said, I've got chills. And anyway, I just kind of let that go. But that was quite significant. I came back to Sydney. This is a long answer, isn't it?
It's a great answer.
I came back to Sydney and a lovely friend of mine, Eloise, was putting on, interestingly enough, it was called Soul Sessions. Now, she asked me to be the MC. They had amazing guests. They would have, it was almost like going to a concert where you have the support band and the main act, except the support band was someone in Australia. We should bring them back, Janie.
Yeah.
And then the main act was someone from overseas. So it was the first time I met Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Dispenza, yeah.
And who's one of my teachers who I love. And Dr. Joe talked about teaching children to meditate. Then it came up again and again. And really, I was on a flight, actually, and there were so many children crying. My kids are really good at traveling because I guess they've traveled a lot from when they were young. They had to just pick up and come with me wherever I was going. I think Manon, who's now 25, she was only about 3 months old. I was DJing on the Russell Gilbert show. I was like his sidekick. It was called Russell Gilbert Live. So she travelled to Melbourne with me every weekend for 6 months. So anyway, that's a sidestep. Back on path, I was on the flights. Children were crying, and I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great if they had a meditation to listen to or something nice? Because back then there were movies and things, but it was way before we had podcasts and even films for children. Like now there's a lot of animations and things like that. So I started a course called Soul Goals. At the same time, I got my heart broken, and I would turn up on a Monday night and my teacher, Justine, would say, "You sure you don't want to, your goal isn't to get over this guy?" And I'd be like, no, I just want to get children meditating. Anyway, cut a long story short, during the course of the course, I ended up, because I needed to write meditations for children to listen to on planes, which I had no idea how it was going to happen, I wrote a program for them to come and learn meditation, 10 weeks, and that's still my foundation program. At the same time, through Soul Goals and the techniques Justine taught, Justine Rusnick, who's sadly not with us anymore, but Justine introduced me really much more deeply into Dr. Joe's techniques. So I would meditate every morning and I would visualize my meditations on the plane. It just said meditations by Zoe Sheridan or children's meditations by Zoe Sheridan, you know, on their little screen that you're sitting there.
Yes.
I had no idea how it was going to happen. I just saw it, and while I was watching it and in that meditative state, I would feel so proud of myself. I would feel relief that it was done, but really celebrating and joyful. I get invited to a voiceover agency party, and as we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I was the voice of Virgin, then their safety announcer. And it just so happened that the head of Virgin Entertainment was there. and I was introduced to her, and I said, I'm the safety announcement girl. She was like, yeah. And I said to her, I'm really interested in putting in meditations for children's on planes, on flights. And she loved the idea, and it happened very quickly, really, really quickly. And all of a sudden there they were. And I was feeling all of those emotions. I'm feeling them now, telling you I was so proud and relieved. And, you know, it happened really quickly. I had them written mainly, so I just went into the studio and recorded them. I asked Frank if I could have his music, which he'd channeled while he was in a very high vibe state underneath them. And from there, Qantas asked if I could put them onto their flights. So they went from Virgin into Qantas and Jetstar, which was great because then they were on international flights. At the same time, I began teaching children meditations. So then, now that's like, I think it was around 2010, so maybe 2010, around then, so 15 years ago. And I started just at Bondi Beach. There's a beautiful pavilion there. It's just been renovated, so it's really beautiful now. Wasn't as much when I was there, but the room is still there. And so I did it after school so that children could come from different schools. And yeah, I loved it.
That's amazing. Now and thank you for sharing that. Let's just go back a little bit for our listeners in particular. Let's just touch on meditation, the actual act of meditation, because for some, when they think or it gets suggested to them that, you know, you need to start learning to meditate, you need to meditate more and what have you. For some of us, we go, not me, but this used to be me. So that's why I'm also bringing it up, because I know so many of our listeners will relate to this. You think of meditation and you think, I can't meditate. Like, I've tried, I've gone into this, I've done all the things they've told us to do, I've closed my eyes, I've taken the deep breaths, and then I'm thinking about what I'm supposed to be cooking for dinner tonight, what I did today at work that I didn't get finished, what I've got to do tomorrow for the kids, what I'm, you know, where I've got to, my doctor's appointments next week, fill in the gap, right? And all these things come in and so many people say, I can't meditate, don't know how to meditate, can't meditate. So before we get back into children's meditation, for you as an adult being introduced to meditation, how did you feel about that in that moment? And also, what would you say to our listeners in regards to actually just starting meditation?
Great question. It's so true. I get that so often. I can't meditate. I've tried. I'm a very good teacher. So let me start off by saying it is a skill. And like any skill, practice makes perfect. There are also many different kinds of meditation. It's like, you know, if I asked you, do you clean your teeth every day? Do you take a shower? It's the first thing I do. And it wasn't the first thing I did today, actually, because I was nervous about what am I going to wear? You know, like coming to see Janie, I was really excited. And then I was like, oh, I haven't meditated. And it totally changed my energy. It was the best thing I did today. So it is a skill, and it is something that I would start with very in small increments, but consistently. And I would try different kinds. So we have a mantra meditation, which is the first one I learned from Siddha Yoga, which is run by Guru Maya, the one who's in Eat, Pray, Love. And she actually came to Australia, which was
Have you met her?
It was so weird, Jamie.
Yeah.
So everyone lined up to go and see her, and I got to her, and remember I had crutches, and I thought that was why, but no, she got me to sit next to her on the stage 2 days in a row for the whole retreat thing. She gave me a little teddy bear, which I still have. And she said, I'll see you in Melbourne. And I had no intention of going to Melbourne. And it just happened that I went to Melbourne. Anyway, I'm getting off track. With Siddha Yoga, they start with a mantra. And probably a lot of listeners would have heard of TM meditation, transcendental meditation. where you are given a personal mantra. Now, with a mantra, you go over and over and over it again, and they are amazing. When I went to India, I learned many beautiful mantras that you learn and you sing them, and just by the repetition and the singing, even if you can't sing, you still do it. It's really fun. You do get into a beautiful state. It's not my cup of tea for meditation, but a lot of people love it. So the City Yoga one is Om Namah Shivaya, and it goes Om Namah Shivaya. So I haven't warmed up my singing voice today. So Om Namah Shivaya translates to I kneel before myself, with the philosophy that if you can love yourself first, if you can take care of yourself first, if you can see yourself and all the perceived imperfections without judging yourself, then you're in a beautiful place to love everyone else, which is the goal, right? That's one. There's also, of course, focusing on your breath. The first thing we do when we're here and the last thing we do is breathe. And it's interesting. Sometimes when I'm teaching children or adults and I get them to take a deep breath in, and if you do it now while you're listening, take 3 deep breaths, you'll notice the immediate change in your energy. And it might be the first time you've even paid any attention to your breath at all. The coolest thing about your breath is that we can regulate our emotions with our breath. So if you are feeling anxious or overwhelmed, if you can remind yourself to just slow down your breathing, no one even has to know. You can do it quietly. Janie's probably doing it now.
I am.
You can immediately regulate your emotions in your nervous system. For example, there's the box breath, which is really cute to teach children because it's like there's a little present in it, which is presence. But you, with your finger, you point, kind of draw a line upwards in the air, and that's the line of the box. And you can't, for adults, I would say 4. For children, you can do 2, and you breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4, breathe in, and then you hold, and then you breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you hold for 4, and that's the box. Now, I'm not sure what philosophy this is, but it's quite beautiful, where they say when you breathe in, you walk towards God, or God walks towards you, I think. When you hold your breath, you're with God. That's it. And then when you breathe out, you walk towards God. So that's lovely as well.
That's
but
beautiful.
Breath is great, and it's really easy. And I think it's a really good one for children to learn. But the easiest one that I found to teach children and that I teach, and I'll be running a meditation class, well, Monday night, but I can say Monday night because hopefully I'll be doing them every Monday, is a guided meditation, and that's for beginners. And there's so many different guided meditations. You can do a body scan, you can do some inner child work. It's very healing, and you can go on a beautiful journey.
Yeah, guided meditations are the ones that I found were really good to get me into it, because I was one of those people that went when I was told years and years and years ago, Janie, one thing you need to do, because you're all over the shop all the time and everything that you do, that you need to start to meditate. And that was one of the things I sort of like, I can't sit for 10 minutes, let alone, do anything else. And it was the guided meditation that actually, the introduction to that actually helped me.
Did you get great results?
I got excellent results. And as a result, it's interesting, you also mentioned Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's one of my great mentors as well. And, I've done a lot of work in and around what he teaches and his philosophy. And I think it's really interesting, the correlation between meditation and manifestation. The two of them are not separate from one another. And I think that that's another great gift and surprise to people who first start to get into meditation of any form, that they actually see the benefits outside of that is manifestation, like you explained before, as far as
Getting the
with
meditations.
Virgin Airlines. So let's talk about what you're doing now and how you are bringing in the thing that you really are passionate about, and that is teaching children meditation. And I will start with this question. Kids are hard to pin down for 2 seconds. Like they've got their bowls of energy. They're always wanting to do something. They're always going places. They always want to, keeping their attention span for anything is, most listeners who have got kids or grandkids will agree with me, is like, it's a bit of a challenge. So can you give us an overview of children's meditation, why you're passionate and why you're doing it now?
That is the perception. I possibly may have thought that. I can't remember. It was so long ago. I think I was blessed with really chilled children. They were never the ones that got up like at 6 a.m. I would have to wake them up. But with teaching meditation, I noticed very quickly the first class, they're a little bit restless. They're kind of curious, what's this all about? But once they do that first class, the second one, they are on the mats. They're like, what are we doing today? It's almost like they're remembering something. Now, I really want to teach meditation because I feel like our children are in crisis. And I know that sounds dramatic, but this generation of children, even my children, even my younger brother who's 30, has never had his life without a phone. We're so lucky we can remember that. I really do think that. And I think as children, we were on our bikes, we were outside a lot playing sport. And a lot of children are. I don't want to generalize here. A lot of children are still doing a lot of outdoor activities. A lot of other children are in dark rooms getting their dopamine hits from video games, from phones. It was really alarming when I saw it was footage, from like a camera in a child's room, and this baby was in a cot. So they were probably between 12 months and 18 months, and they were asleep and they were dreaming, and they were, if you can imagine, I'm swiping my phone in their sleep. That really scared me. Hugh Grant, the actor, was recently on Instagram talking about his concerns, and he made a really good point that his child would bargain with him. Like he said, the most thing we argue about is screen time. And he said, for example, as well, my child will say, I want to go and play at Janie's house because Janie has unlimited screen time. Her parents are like, yeah, go for it. So there's these kind of battles going on all of the time as well, which is something I didn't really have to deal with because my children are now 25 and 22, and they weren't into video games. They were into sport and stuff, which was good. But it's really hard, and I feel like because it's almost like we're putting them in pubs playing poker machines, and they are just constantly. I don't want to focus on this negative part, but anyway, they are in crisis, and there are many things that can help them. Schools are bringing in yoga, getting them into sport. I know Steiner schools don't have phones at all, but the point that Hugh Grant was making was that they're all getting their own personal computers or screens, and he was like, this is the one time I want them to have a break at school. They don't need it there. Anyway, so I think with meditation, there are so many benefits. The amygdala calms down, and the parts of your brain, the grey matter that reduce stress and promote creativity, focus and calmness, improves within 2 weeks of meditating. And that can be 5 minutes a day for a child, just the consistency. It improves their well-being, their sleep, their self-confidence. The meditations, the guided ones that I do, really focus on self-love and appreciating everyone's differences. There's so many positives with meditation. I'm looking up because I'm thinking about with my beautiful grandma who taught me prayer, really. She would teach me to pray every night, which is a form of meditation. And I loved that connection. And that also got my imagination going. What does heaven look like? Is it cherubs on clouds? You know, I had a pretty good imagination anyway, but it's when I take them in a guided meditation. Oh, it's 11:11. When I take them on a guided meditation, they're either going to fairyland or they're going to meet their spirit animal, or they're learning about chakras, and I'll take them in a rocket ship to different planets. So it's getting their imaginations going. At the same time, they're very calm. And then after meditation, I will always give them an art project to do, which is really nice. So that, I can't remember. Oh, so anyway, yeah, they're very calm. To answer your question, I just remembered what you asked me. With the very first meditation class, whether it's a private client or at a school, I always give the child a crystal. I usually give them a rose quartz. Rose quartz are great to take bad dreams away. So I say you can put it next to your bed. But the main reason is that acts as an anchor, what we call an anchor, which is a reminder for the child to meditate, a reminder that they can breathe and self-regulate their emotions. So in that first class, I'll tell them about crystals, how to cleanse them, what they do, and that just spikes their interest. Children now love crystals. In fact, I think they've been called the crystal children or the indigo children. So yeah, that really hooks them in. I guess that's my hook, giving them a crystal.
It would be.
And then we go on a meditation with mermaids and dolphins, and in the meditation, they're given a crystal by the king or queen of the ocean, whoever happens to be that time that I'm doing it. Yeah.
Zoe, I think it's a really important time in humanity in general, as you've already pointed out, to be not only introducing but enhancing this for our kids today. And I can see that, and I'm sure that our listeners as well can hear the passion that you've got with what you're doing. Now, we're really excited that you're doing it, and I know that you're going to be doing it in lots more different areas and venues and lots of different ways that people can access exactly what you're doing. And certainly in our show notes, we're going to put all those details for everybody as well. Zoe, if you had an 8-year-old Zoe in front of you right now, what advice would you give her?
I wouldn't change too much. I don't have any regrets except buying an MG convertible when I was 25 instead of investing the money into property. That's one thing I do regret. I've had a very blessed life and I feel very fortunate. I would probably say to her, you have everything already within you. You don't need to search outwardly. I know as a child, I think a lot of females in particular, and I don't want to be gender biased, but were people pleasers because we were told, oh, you're a good girl. Thanks for doing that. Oh, looking after your brother or doing the dishes or whatever it might be. You're such a good girl. So I would often, throughout my life for a long time, think the way to receive love or praise was to do things. So I would say, you're okay, you're whole, you're enough, you're beautiful, you're perfect. Everything else I was told, I didn't listen to anyway. So I don't even know if I would have listened to myself. My grandma was always giving me great advice, and my dad and my mum, and I didn't really listen to all of it anyway. So, but I would just say that because I think we're always searching for things outside of ourselves. And that's the beauty of teaching meditation, is teaching children that they are enough and they're perfect.
Yeah, it's great advice and great way for us to close this fabulous interview with you, Zoe. Thank you so much for being a part of Soul Sentred, the podcast, and giving our audience just a little bit of an insight on children's meditation, which, by the way, I had never heard of until I met you. As well. And as a grandparent, I'm really excited about introducing that to my grandchildren and getting them involved because, sometimes we do things in life for ourselves, which is really important, but we also forget that potentially that is something that the next generations could very well, benefit from. And those next generations are right in front of us, our kids, our grandchildren, and I think it's fabulous, and bringing it into schools as you're going to be doing, and bringing it in even into childcare centres and kindergartens, and having access for parents as well is really exciting. So Zoe, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and we look forward to. Can we have you back again in the future and actually maybe even take us through some meditations?
100%. I just wanted to say, actually, Janie, because you were talking about your grandchildren, for everyone there is a free the particular one we talked about, Mermaids and Dolphins, the crystal one, is free to download on my website, which is zoesheridan.com. That's easy. zoesheridan.com. And yeah, the best time, any time is great to start meditation, but before a child is 7, their brains are like a sponge and there's less resistance to it. But yeah, so download that and I would love to come back. I will come back anytime you want.
Fabulous. We're definitely going to have you back because I know everybody is going to want to hear more of what you're doing, how they can get their kids involved as well. But also thank you for bringing this into the world the way that you are, because it will make a difference. It is making a difference and you're making a difference. Zoe Sheridan, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Janie. Thank you, Soul Sentred.